What's going on, YouTube? Rukari back with another episode of the Minotaur Hotel, and of course, all hell is breaking loose. His ears twitch. He detects similar motion in the other nearby houses as dawn continues to break. Poor guy is getting shot at. You got too friendly with the wrong people, Bubba. In the morning twilight, the entire town seems to rouse itself in kind from the wolves' epicenter, single-minded as a bike of bees defending their hive. A bike of bees? Is that a phrase? The morning's rush has started early. The old wolf bolts at the sudden shift in routine, paws beating a chaotic rhythm towards the tree line. Later in the night, he will return to investigate what remains of his gesture of goodwill. For now, instinct dictates that he must flee. I don't think they're happy with your gesture, buddy. I think you're in trouble. As might be expected of an interaction between predators, the flight of one instigates the other to chase. In hardly any time at all, the town has gathered a small force of able-bodied men to hunt the animal down, and either drive him off or destroy him. It is for their own protection, they tell themselves. Conflicts between men and wolves have seen countless iterations over the millennia, though they have come a long way since the Neolithic. Guns have replaced bows and spears. Days of careful subterfuge and tracking on foot have been outmoded by vehicles of all kind. It used to be that one could at least pretend that things were fair, that the gulf between man and animal wasn't like the space between heaven and earth. An old wolf can scarce compete with the innumerable advantages man's ingenuity has won him over the generations. In the distance behind him, the wolf's keen ears pick up the thrumming of a source of sound which is harrowing and unknowable to his simple mind. Though he cannot understand their functions, he can hear each piston firing in rapid succession and each tiny explosion propelling the mechanical monster onward in its pursuit. Above, the birds share his sentiments, halting their songs and scattering upon the wind in a flurry of fearful motion. He comes to a brief stop at the edge of a clearing, turning around to face his attackers. Golden eyes dart around, seeking any angle of advantage in what remains of his time before the distance closes. The terrain favors neither party, too heavily forested for a car to be of any use in a direct approach, and moist enough to make the wolf's paw prints stand out against the otherwise rocky soil should tracking prove necessary. The men dismount their vehicles at a distance of a few hundred meters, each one hoping to make the killing shot. The elders fan out to seek an optimal angle, looking for vantage points with which to secure their victory. One, younger than the others, boasts that he can make it from where he stands. The others scoff in response, but make no attempt to dissuade the glory-hungry youth from his attempt. He will either succeed or else learn to temper his tongue. Hunting, for men as well as wolves, is a realm in which the difference of a few millimeters can alter a killing blow into an ineffectual waste of effort. Breath must be measured, wind and weather must be accounted for, coiling of the muscles must be balanced against sweat upon the hands. Eyes are made to squint, whether down a scope at a dangerous beast or a muzzle at a deer's hind quarters. There is seldom margin for error. The young man pulls the bolt back, drawing a round out of the magazine and into the chamber. Bracing the butt of his rifle against his shoulder, he steadies his aim, checks his sight picture, and pulls the trigger. Only to be interrupted, sabotaged by a purposeful flick to his gun's barrel from one of his seniors. The results speak for themselves. The old wolf lets out a piteous whine as the discharged bullet grazes his right side, a hair's breadth from lodging itself in his chest cavity. The men behind him immediately erupt into a heated argument, shouting and coming to blows at such betrayal, but the old wolf moves on with the thunderous echo of gunfire in his ears. He sprints toward safety at a breakneck speed, moving with such haste that the light reaching his eyes becomes a graying smear of nonsense information. He knows nothing of firearms, nor of how he came to harm at such a distance, but he understands well enough to run as fast and as far as his legs will carry him. At times, fear overtakes all else. Like a flame, it melts away and purifies the unnecessary element of conscious thought, leaving only the pursuit of survival. Whatever limited cognition the wolf has, his whole body throbs with this sort of desperate, confused vigor, unable to process anything beyond the necessary motion of his limbs. He hardly registers the change in the soil's texture beneath his paws, or the sudden harshness of the sun's rays upon his back. When he comes to a stop, there are no humans in sight, nor is there a trace of the sea of trees and ice to which he had become accustomed. Somehow, he has found his way from his home in the frigid taiga to an expanse of arid shrubland. Still, necessity forbids him linger to appraise his new surroundings. The hot sand scorches his paws, and the cruel sun threatens to set his cold dark fur ablaze like so much kindling. He lopes on, wheezing into the nearest source of shade, a convenient pile of rocks under which he hopes to wait out the heat of the day while he reorients himself. As the old wolf rests in his makeshift shelter, his keen ears direct his attention across the desert sands towards another building, what modern-day and more cosmopolitan members of mankind would likely recognize as a hotel. Every so often he'll hear another car roar by and rise to his feet in preparation to flee, but none of the metal beasts discover his hiding place, nor do the humans riding them. Their purpose is as unintelligible to him as ever, despite the unity of their direction. Beyond the baleful gunfire boom of the occasional backfiring engine, the air is thick with an unnatural stillness, as if the sun's heat had sterilized it long ago and would not suffer it to be defiled again by the ragged rhythm of a breath. With nothing else to do, his eyes wander the wasteland, seeking any familiar signs. No mites, nor fleas, nor flies are in this desert. No herds subsist on these mere shrubs and thorny bushes. There are no buzzards, no carrion birds to circle fresh corpses, showing the way to sustenance. No clouds, no water for his thirst. Only the men in their solitary shelter on the cliff seem capable of defying the elements. The wolf reaches the appropriate conclusion quickly enough. Something is gravely wrong. There is an evil here, an unsubtle hatred baked into the very earth beneath his paws. He feels it whispering, seething hostility to every sense as it sucks the moisture from his body. His eyes sting as a gust of wind cakes them with dust, and his nasal mucosa are soon as cracked and dry as the riverbed below. He pants in a vain attempt to thermoregulate, but the napalm air brings no relief. Even in the shade, he burns. His eyes are glass. It hurts to breathe. You should come to the hotel, buddy. Death before him, behind him, below him, he waits for dusk's sweet cool to make him move. The oppressive heat alone has kept him still, though his mind races on. He has to leave. He has to leave, and yet what other choice does he have but to bide his time and let the danger pass? For all he knows, the hunters could still be on his trail. More than once he works up sufficient courage to start poking around outside his hidey hole, only for a passing car to make him retreat. Only long silence and gentle starlight can steal him onwards on his journey towards the parking lot. The hotel is looking very nice, at least. He chances a brief investigation before he makes his way inside. The metal beasts are all asleep, and likely they're humans too. Beneath a scent of petrol typical of their species, each has no relation to the others. They, as he, were likely whisked away by some unknown force. The wolf briefly contemplates lapping up the evening dew that has collected in the tailpipes of these vehicles, but a sharp chemical odor makes him think better of it. Given the choice between thirst and possible poisoning, experience leads him to favor the devil he knows. Still, he treads as lightly as he can, unsure what fresh dangers the night may hold. Though he is unsteady on his legs, the solid surface of the tarmac buoys him up. Unlike the sand beyond, it does not give way beneath him when he moves, or resist his every effort through it. As he gets closer to the hotel's entrance, a barrage of new scents gives the old wolf further pause. Layered atop the stink of a great many humans, he can perceive the distinctive odor of livestock, and curiosity overtakes caution for an instant. If he can make a kill, the beast's blood could provide a valuable source of liquid refreshment. Even if it may cause some trouble to the humans living here, whatever strange means have enabled them to survive in this foul place will likely not suffer much from the loss of a single animal. Well, the single animal you are killing, yes, we would suffer quite a bit, but also he wouldn't die, so I guess we'd be okay? His need is great. He stalks on towards the source of the smell, trying to obscure himself by clever use of natural blind spots behind furniture and sharp corners. He catches sight of his quarry first, only to freeze up, struck by the alien sight of a bull that walks like a man. When he next moves, sheer shock makes him forget to mask the sound of his footsteps. He attracts the strange creature's attention.
Hello? Is someone there? If you're looking for a room, I can check you in. Do not worry about the late hour. It is no trouble at all.
The wolf doesn't understand the bipedal bovine, nor could he answer even if he did. Even so, he can sense a genial tone about this bull man, and thinks to try diplomacy again, hoping to earn a place for himself among its herd by force of raw charisma. Perhaps, if these men will accept him, he can be spared nature's wrath, and that precludes him from hurting this creature, however odd it looks. In the time it takes for the wolf to regain his composure and plan his approach, the bull has started his sortie from behind the desk. There is but a split second for the wolf to take control of the conversation before he is put on the back foot once again. He will spare himself the indignity of showing the stranger his belly. Until he has confirmed the bull's intentions, he has no wish to make himself more vulnerable than necessary. Instead, he opts for a simpler gesture of greeting, the lupine equivalent of a firm, masculine handshake. Oh no! Lurching forward into the bull's arms, he closes the distance, ensnaring the other male's muzzle in his own before slipping his tongue inside. The height difference makes the position a bit difficult, but the old wolf continues undeterred, relishing what little moisture he can steal as he swallows his partner's spit. A trace of something sweet and sour crawls from the bullman's throat, and the wolf laps it up without a second thought, even going so far as to probe his partner's gum line for a deeper clue as to its nature. Whatever the bull ate for dinner, it had an array of complex flavors that are utterly lost on a wild animal's palate, although that does not stop the wolf from trying to get more of it after a few hours of starvation. A long moment passes in this awkward embrace before the bullman recovers from his paralysis. The moment he's regained his faculties, he shoves the wolf away with a panicked thrust of his arm, sending the beast tumbling to the floor with a pained wheeze. The upright ungulate immediately sprints off, bellowing at the top of his lungs.
Master, help!
How do you sound scared? Hold on. I have to think about this.
Master, help! A wolf! It tried to eat me!
Disheartened and disheveled, the wolf rises to his feet. Unsure as to the cause of the sudden breakdown in communications, he staggers away in the opposite direction, disappearing into the infinite corridors of the labyrinth in search of a safe place to rest. Oh, poor baby. He's trying to make friends. A wolf has wandered into the hotel. Sorry, Asterion. He just wanted to say hi. You check your clock again. Asterion is taking an awfully long time fetching those check-in forms from the reception. Thoughts of what might be keeping the Minotaur meander through your mind, before scattering as you are overtaken by a jaw-cracking yawn. You are about to give him a call when you hear the familiar sound of his hooves approaching the room from the staircase.
Rukari,
Asterion stops to rest and to catch his breath. Asterion, what's wrong?
I was attacked. There was a giant wolf in reception. It jumped on me and tried to eat me.
You can indeed catch a whiff of an unusual odor coming off Astarion's clothes, the unmistakable smell of wet dog overpowering his usual scent of sun and sea. That's impossible. The hotel can't create life out of thin air, can it?
It is possible, but asphodel flowers are the only form of life the labyrinth can create which does not become instantly aggressive towards me.
Well, I don't remember creating any wolves myself lately. And you say this happened in reception?
Yes.
So nowhere near the valley. You took a good look at Asterion. And you say it attacked you?
It jumped on me and tried to eat me.
You look fine to me, buddy. How exactly did it try to eat you?
Well... It licked my mouth.
I see. And you're sure it wasn't just some guest's very large dog?
Well, it was larger than any dog I have ever seen, large enough to reach my mouth on its hind legs.
Yeah, that is pretty large, yeah. Where is it now?
I don't know. I ran here so I didn't see where the check-in forms. I must have dropped them on the grand staircase on my way here.
Why don't you take a seat and calm down, Asterion? There's nothing to be afraid of, alright? If this was something conjured by the labyrinth, it would have done much worse than try to lick your face, right?
I suppose you are right.
How about this? Why don't you go on to bed while I go pick up the papers from the stairwell? We can sort the situation out tomorrow. I'm sure someone will run into the dog, and maybe we could ask around to see if it belongs to someone.
Yes, I can do that. Thank you, Rukari.
Alrighty, you stay here. I'll find the papers and the dog. The following morning, you inform your staff that there is a large dog loose in the hotel, and tell them to get in touch if they find anything. Then you proceed to plan the day's activities. Alrighty, what do we got? What's on the table? I should really hang out with Luke and Coda more, but I'm really curious about Robert. Okay. Let's see. Manage teams, that's the button. Let's get... Luke, what are you good at? The thing is, Koda's really good at tech and stuff. Ah, no, that's not what I want. Back, I say. Like, Koda's gotten really good at research, and Koda's good at surveying, but he doesn't really get mementos, and I feel like mementos are important for story purposes. We could have both of them and just leave the old Asterion working on this. What were we working towards? Oh, right, I wanted the mythical gym, but the mythical gym requires more tech than contract. That's fine. What do we have right now? Can I... Ledger. I can't actually find out how much stuff I have. Old deed, ledger. Seriously? How much points do I have? How do I find this information? I've got a wine bottle, I've got a tablet called Folly, a folded note, a petroglyph. I guess we're just gonna wait and see what happens. I'm still... No, you know what? I'm changing my mind again. You go here. You go unassigned. Kota will make us tech. And I'm gonna work on Asterion's project for him. Confirm. You review your progress on this project so far. Asterion has a somewhat lengthy document written up with some fragments and translation attempts available on the internet. Now, we're missing something crucial here, Asterion.
What would that be?
I do believe in research papers like these, you're expected to provide sources, or at least some proof that you're not just making everything up. Asterion groans, but nods. We need to provide some fragments of our own so these researchers will know we're legit. We don't happen to have any of those, do we?
I believe we might. Are you ready to go down to the 25th floor?
Is that where I went before? You climb down the stairs side by side, passing the ground floor. 25 more floors later, you're standing next to the familiar plaque on the featureless wall. Asterion summons the door for you, and in you go. I think this is where we found the wine before? Before you stands once again the storage room you saw on your first day at the hotel. Huh, this is where the wine bottle was kept, right? Asterion nods. Man, that feels like so long ago, doesn't it? Asterion guides you down the long corridor past all sorts of historical artifacts. About halfway through, he stops dead in his tracks.
Give me a moment. I cannot quite remember how to... I got it. This will only work if we both look to the right of the hallway. Keep looking that way and let's walk forward, alright?
You do as Asterion instructs, keeping your gaze fixed on the wall. About 50 blind paces later, Asterion stops. Before you can turn around, however, he puts a hand on your shoulder.
Keep looking that way, or it will not work. Give me a moment.
Asterion then takes your hand. You continue to walk together for what feels like a small eternity until Asterion stops again.
Ah, perfect. You can look now.
You turn your gaze. Somehow, you're back near the start of the hallway. You could have sworn you were halfway through when you started looking at the wall, and you're more than sure that you should have reached the end considering how long you kept walking forward. The left side of the hallway looks completely different, however. Instead of the cluttered assortments of artifacts from all sorts of cultures and eras, the items on display are more neatly organized and seem from roughly the same time period.
This is where I keep what I can remember from Crete. Sometimes the labyrinth's dust brings up old, lost things. I do not understand it, but I will not look a gift horse in the mouth. I apologize for the hassle, but I did not want any of the previous masters to know this was here.
Aw, that means I'm special! Well, I'm very thankful that you're sharing this with me, Asterion. I promise to be careful with it. You spend the rest of the afternoon with Asterion, examining all the artifacts and looking for fragments of writing that could have stood the test of time in less ideal circumstances. The Minotaur takes his time explaining each and every one of them to you, and you patiently and eagerly listen to his stories. Once you have a good selection of engraved metals, stones, clay, and carved bones, you command the hotel to create exact replicas. Then you return everything to the display exactly the way you found it and head back to the office. Let's check on the R&D team. No project completed. Wasn't surprised by that. Exploration team. We found something. A poem written in very old parchment. Memento of Astarion's past. Okay. That night, a whole new wave of guests packs the lounge during your usual dinner time. Asterion doesn't even have to bring it up. You can plainly see the agitation in his eyes. He's scared of the wolf. And so you and your Minotaur roommate partake of that most ancient and revered custom, getting some takeout to enjoy in the quiet privacy of your quarters. During dinner, Asterion's attention is grabbed time and time again by his tablet, which lets out 2 or 3 alerts every handful of minutes. The Minotaur is too polite to check it, but you insist that it's all right. He types a brief response and then returns to you with a smile.
Rukari, you won't believe what happened earlier today in the internet. I was browsing that encyclopedia you showed me, and I made a friend.
His ears flick back and forth at the word friend. I'm glad to hear that. How did you meet him, and what's he like?
I was reading articles about flowers when I got a message from him. His name is Dominicus, and he sent me such sweet words. Here, isn't he kind?
Asterion shows you his tablet screen. At first displaying an assortment of deep-fried memes by one Lucas Walker Griffin. He taps around until he finds his way to another message screen, this one covered from top to bottom in letters from the Greek alphabet. Asterion holds the tablet up to you, anticipating a giggle or chuckle. He's already laughing in expectation of your reaction. I'm afraid I can't read Greek. Could you read it out loud for me?
Ah, of course, how could I forget? Just a second.
The conversation begins with an opening all too familiar for any modern man, let alone one as well-lived as Asterion. Hello, I am a preacher for the Fraternity of the Lamb. I am spreading the good news. Do you know the word of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ? Ruin, disgraced, tragedy. An evangelist. One would be forgiven if their guts twisted and cringed in response, but the Minotaur seems altogether unaware. Asterion responds in all of his princely eloquence. Yes, I know words. A brother of the faith, a son of the Lord, a worshipper of the Lamb, answered the stranger. But what is your favorite passage of the Bible, if I may ask? The Beatitudes. Asterion explains to you that these are the famous quotes beginning with, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Before the conversation proceeds, however, the Minotaur reveals the greatest wisdom of all. I am sorry, but my friends told me I ought not to speak to strangers on the World Wide Web. But I am no stranger. My name is Dominicos, and I was asked to contact you in particular to spread joy and happiness. I do not know who requested it, but they identified themselves as a previous guest of yours. They were very grateful for your hospitality. After that, the evangelist goes on at length about said guest's gratitude. Asterion's smile lingers even after he sets his tablet back down, and throughout the remainder of your meal. I'm happy for you, buddy. But beware, some people on the internet might have other motives. If this Dominicos guy asks for any money or your personal information, please tell me.
I will, worry not. Ah, that reminds me, this has led me to discovering something quite useful for us. The Greek this man uses, it is quite different from that which I learned in the early days of the labyrinth. I was expecting to struggle a lot with it, but it turns out that the hotel managed to translate it a bit, just enough to make it understandable for me. One of these days I will try to, well, update the hotel's translation. I might know how to do it.
When you settle in after finishing dinner, Asterion becomes lost in thought. At times, he looks to the drawer where you hid Clement's letter. How's the writing going? Did you write down any poetry?
Oh, yes, I did, in fact. After I kindled the hearth's flame, I went to the garden, to Lord Hades' statue, to the asphodels and dittany tree. I've had the silliest thought nagging at me for ages now. When I was a boy, I would scrape or injure myself. And I would scrape or injure myself, one of my brothers would rub dittany leaves on my wounds. I cannot be naive enough to believe that Lord Hades knew of my preference, but I sometimes wish he did, that this may be the reason why such a tree grows by his statue. I felt such a strong emotion today, tending to the garden. It reminded me of a poem I wrote long ago. I wrote it down again, of course.
Asterion looks out the window to the crescent moon outside.
Do you think, Rukari, Lord Hades could have known?
I'm sure he did. It must have been his gift to you. It's the least he could have done for a loyal member of his royal guard and sparring partner.
A god caring about a mortal. That's a very innocent idea, Rukari. But I suppose, well, my good and wise master, it is your command that I believe your words. Should I bow down and obey?
You should believe me because I'm right, not because of masterhood or this lordship or this or lordship that. I didn't say any of those words right. Hold on a second. You should believe me because I'm right, not because of masterhood this or lordship that.
Very well, sir. Truth or not, the thought alone brings joy.
You should, because you deserve to be happy. Alrighty, we're back to the wolf. Please don't cause too much trouble, baby boy. You're wandering somewhere in the hotels, aren't you? However well life has managed to adapt to the most inhospitable of climates, there remain certain minimum conditions necessary for it to exist, and nowhere are those requirements more evident than in places where they are scarce, absent, or otherwise inaccessible. For daring to overreach, the wolf has earned only suffering. Gone are the days when he could slack his thirst at the first brook, find his bed beneath any tree, or satisfy his hunger with a simple hunt. Still, he retains his wits entirely about him, and no industry or injury deprive him of the robust constitution which has enabled his survival until this point. Trite as it may seem, life finds a way. In the time that has passed since his second diplomatic failure, the wolf has devoted himself solely to securing his means of subsistence. Whatever resources the bipedal bovine or his herd may have to offer in the future, he cannot rely on such a tenuous relationship in the immediate. A source of potable water is his highest priority, followed by food and shelter. Thankfully, his nose is sufficient to point him towards a source of liquid refreshment within a few minutes of his first encounter. What someone of a more human persuasion may recognize as a restroom. Yep, I felt that coming. Imagine the joy in his heart to see fresh water available for anyone's convenience, or the feeling of relief at plunging headfirst into a cool oasis after a day spent baking beneath the desert sun. At the hour of his arrival, the public restrooms are as deserted as the hotel's entrance, and he takes the opportunity to gather himself while foot traffic remains scarce. As his mental faculties return, he remains vigilant for any change in his surroundings, but the hours tick by with nary a sound or scent. And so he takes what rest he can. The dull ache in his ribs where the bullman punched him ebbs away with time, as does the dizzy weakness of his limbs once he has drunk his fill. Eventually, he chances marking the watering hole as his territory. Though it is hardly a defensible position, it shall remain a key resource until he has been able to get the lay of the land, and had a chance to accustom himself to the daily routine of his new abode. Ah, great, so the toilet is now the wolf's. However, as he begins his work, a thought occurs. He notices no trace of man or beast who might contest his claim. Somehow, he is the only thing that he can smell. It is no mean feat, especially for an animal who is used to tracking prey kilometers away by nothing more than an errant drop of phlegm from a runny nose, to smell nothing. Imagine, if you will, what it might be like to open your eyes and see a sterile void with only the reflection of your own body to remind you that you aren't blind. Think of being trapped in a pure white room, smooth to deny your sense of touch and soundproof to deny you hearing. Fed white rice, unseasoned, to deny you taste or smell. Kept alive, but only just, in an empty realm where loneliness kills the soul. Such is the wolf's experience in the fumbling desperation of disability, having had a fundamental part of himself rendered useless by unknown means. Still, his inhumanity shields him from realizing the full extent of this madness. The pin-and-needle numbness of the senses glides off the wolf's mind like water from a duck's back. He hasn't enough of a psyche for psychological torture to effect. While he can scarce afford to be terrified of each unknown phenomenon, it nonetheless gives him pause to have one sense contradict another. He knows the hotel to be inhabited, whether by kine, men, fowl, or some combination thereof. He has seen them enter. Smelled the sea breeze, sweat, and sunshine beating off the bullman's skin. As he pops his head back into the hallway, his wet fur helps him detect a slight breeze, wholly unlike the arid air which buffeted him before. This wind seems to circulate of its own volition, without any heed for the ways architecture may impede airflow. There is no clue his animal mind can parse about its origin or nature. A brief retracing of his steps yields nothing either, and nobody answered the bullman's call for help. He dares not linger, but he can at least be sure that nothing will surprise him from behind. The wolf stalks on with all caution towards the nearest source of sound, unwilling to abandon himself to slumber until his needs are met. Sure enough, he recognizes the crackle of a fire through the lounge, though the lounge landscape is just as alien to him as the lifeless desert outside. The tables and chairs are just another shape taken by the deformed trees which dot the cursed wasteland. He gives them as wide a berth as possible, like a man might a minefield while approaching the hotel's hearth. Though his thick fur makes him scorn the heat it radiates, Hestia's blessing is not wholly lost on the wolf's animal brain. He understands on some instinctual level that the dancing firelight signifies a place of rest for weary wanderers, though the smokeless flames keep him from surrendering to the aura of calm that pervades his surroundings. A pang of hunger urges the wolf to continue foraging for food. His prior experience in the human village leads him to seek out anything that looks like it might contain scraps, plastic bags, or metal bins. After a bit of searching, he nudges open a lidded pot and finds leftover soup, long since cooled and congealed into a chunky goo. Never has a single living creature before or since been so happy to discover an aspic. The world seems to regain a little color as he gets a whiff of the meaty ooze. The sterile numbness recedes as his nose processes its savory scent, predominantly chicken, accompanied by the earthy undertone of root vegetables. He senses no trace of a hunter's meddling around the pot, no poison in the food, nor metal jaws to lame his leg, nor flaxen snares to catch him by the paw. To spare his aged joints the struggle of a prolonged period upright, he bites the rim of the pot and drags it to the floor. Nothing spills. The hardened collagen that leached from the bones when the stock was brewed holds all the ingredients locked in a prison of fleshy gelatin. Unsure how to best ingest the semi-solid mass, he gingerly licks it with his tongue before shoving his whole head into the pot to chew everything in reach. The leftover portion of soup is heavy with meat to the wolf's delight. He makes quick work of it, allowing the booming echo of his eating to deafen him to everything else for a few short minutes. Oh, when is Coda gonna walk in and find this poor boy? Once he's disengaged from his dinner, the wolf leaves the lounge with little bits of aspic stuck to his thick fur. He sets out with a simple objective, to find a place in the hotel where he will not be discovered until the next evening. It may have served his purposes well enough at the time, but the wolf has no desire to return to his makeshift shelter in the desert, for fear that a full day in the sweltering heat will be the end of him. Likewise, he rules out any place where living beings are liable to congregate, such as the hotel's entrance or the watering hole. He breaks into a jog at a leisurely 20 kilometers per hour or so and dashes off. Before too long, however, the hotel's geography begins to truly confound his senses. As he continues down the marble corridors, they seem to stretch perceptibly beyond his range of vision. The rocky ground refuses to hold tracks of any kind, and the hotel's magic erases all scent from the air. A glance backwards confirms his loss of bearings. He can see no path back to where he'd been, beyond simply turning around and running the other way for a few kilometers. Everywhere he looks, space seems to repeat. Each door and tile and bit of molding is just another iteration of itself, an endless meanders of misdirection. An eternal meanders of misdirection. He seeks a stairwell next, and heads up a dozen floors in hopes of finding any break in the perfect pattern. Like the fractal splitting of a tree's trunk into innumerable branches and twigs, every avenue of exploration only yields the same empty hallways and wooden doors as all those prior. The wolf comes to a stop long before his stamina gives out. His thought process shifts into a cost-benefit analysis of sort. Conserving enough of his energy for the coming days is critical, and he has no intention of spending more time seeking safe harbor than is strictly necessary. Whatever trickery is interfering with his other senses, his ears work well enough. He listens at every corner and every door for movement, be it footsteps or breathing. Silence. Sinking to the ground, he watches for any changes until his mind grows as empty as the hallway's horizon. Consciousness departs soon after. The old wolf's sleep is dreamless, as devoid of life as the world which greets him once he opens his eyes. The early hours of the day have passed without incident, just as he had hoped. However, the nature of his new home carries an unforeseen drawback. He has lost all sense of time. Under normal circumstances, a simple look skyward would allow him to tell the hour, but the artificial sun embedded in the cave roof The artificial suns embedded in the cave roof do not move through their rocky sky with the passage of time. Likewise, though the lights were dimmer when he first entered, true darkness never seems to fall. No stars emerge from behind the veil of cloudy stones, nor are there any windows through which he could see outside if he so wished. Furthermore, the remoteness of the wolf's sleeping spot prevents him from using the behavior of other animals to judge the duration of his rest. Humans, he has learned, best function during the day. Conversely, many other species, such as deer and rabbits, become more active in the twilight hours to avoid the attention of predators. In any case, his usual metrics for measuring time are rendered useless. All he can conclude is what his circadian rhythm tells him. He has rested for long enough, and it is time to move on. Prudence bids him solve the most pressing issue first. If he is to live at any length within these walls, he must find more points of reference by which to navigate. He prepares himself for the journey back to the hotel's entrance, and then sets off at a middling pace. With eyes peeled and ears perked up, the wolf does his utmost to anticipate any potential threats before they emerge. And we're back with the Wolfman. However, as he rounds a corner no more than a few minutes' walk from his starting location, he finds himself mere paces away from his objective. At the end of the hall, the wolf can make out the bullman's silhouette and a human in conversation with him. Before either can notice his intrusion, he does an about-face and sprints back towards his hideout. The bovine biped's violent reaction has made him wary of contact with it, just as the abrasion on his side reminds him of his encounter with the human hunters. Once he has retreated a safe distance away, he turns around to make certain that he hasn't been followed. A perfunctory check behind him reveals only the same accursed hallway stretching to infinity. The wolf sallies forth several times more, only to spook as the hotel's magic redirects him towards his destination. He moves slower with each attempt, to be certain that his mind isn't playing tricks. The result is always the same, though his concentration never lapses. There is no pattern to when or where he's whisked away. No matter what direction he runs, or what feints or convolutions in his steps, he inevitably finds the hotel's entrance as soon as his mind turns towards it. On his final approach, he moves through the hall as though traversing the surface of a frozen lake, expecting the ground to fall away beneath him with each step. He seeks the seam, awaiting the exact moment when space warps and delivers him somewhere impossible. If he can comprehend the rules by which this phenomenon operates, then he can turn it to his advantage. As he grows less panicked and more inquisitive, his intentions change, and the hotel responds. He comes out on the other side of the lobby and promptly ducks into the nearest alcove he can find. The shaft which holds the spiral staircase is of a large enough size that he can hide in the hollow beneath without much effort. In addition, when he is pressed flush against the curvature of the wall, his silhouette becomes even harder to notice. The shadows beneath the stone structure allow him to make use of his natural camouflage, despite the relative illumination of his surroundings. Though it means giving up both the advantage of sight and his ability to move as he pleases for the duration of the day, he has found a vantage point to stalk his quarry. Here he may learn how the denizens of this desert not only survive, but thrive, and how he may best integrate himself among them. Unlike the town from which he escaped, the wolf can perceive nothing resembling an economy of being. Both need and necessity seem as alien within the hotel's walls as they are endemic to the world outside. He can tell from the irregularity of their movements that these people are accustomed to a languid lifestyle. Not a single one possesses anything resembling a purpose or a sense of urgency. They shuffle through the adjoining passages at such irregular intervals that it could not be otherwise. Everyone's just here to relax and recover, and so are you. Lacking any form of diversion by which to pass the time, the wolf makes a game of trying to gauge the settlement's demographic composition. Before too long, he has learned to identify basic information from what he can hear, the sounds of footsteps in varying strides, and the occasional voice. There is no imbalance between the sexes that he can notice, but the results are skewed another way. Children are few and far between, while the elderly are present in relative abundance. In addition, he can hear no other animals beyond the now familiar hoofbeats belonging to the bullman. Assuming he is successful in earning a place among them, his victory may be short-lived if this settlement lacks the means to sustain its population. The wolf is in his twilight years himself, and has no desire to start from scratch should the human with him which he bonds pass on before him. I didn't read that right. I'm not having a good day at reading today. The wolf is in his twilight years himself, and he has no desire to start from scratch should the human with which he bonds pass on before him. By whatever means its people are whisked into the hotel's space, migration can only do so much. Replacing one elderly person with another won't solve the underlying issues, either the wolf's desire for companionship or the community's need for productive, able-bodied adults. Well, there's this one dude. You may have seen him talking to the Minotaur? As the hours tick by and the lights dim, restlessness sets into his bones as surely as the stiffness of age takes his joints from the prolonged periods of stillness. Both spur him to his feet once the silence has taken root, and in the dark his courage renews itself. Before he begins his nightly exploration, he shall make his rounds to the watering hole to refresh himself, and the lounge to eat. He arrives at the same scene as his first night. The marble floor is pristine, bearing no trace of his scent marking in the slightest. He relieves himself without worry. Perhaps a greater quantity of urine will prove more difficult to erase, and thus may he assert his presence to the world. After allowing himself a perfunctory frolic in the toilet, he shakes himself dry and lopes away. The lounge, too, was as he left it, and after a day spent in the relative cool of the hotel's innards, he is better able to appreciate the warmth of the hearth. He allows himself to be comforted, however briefly, by the primal instincts of his kind, and the fruitful friendship facilitated by this most stalwart and indispensable of man's tools. The simple ease of driving off the night's lingering chill overcomes him as he stares deep into the flickering flames. Perhaps this is what the first wolves felt as they shared the blessing of man's fire. Before he can become too comfortable, he trundles over to the lounge counter where lies his prize. Some cold cuts of meat and cheese have been left out for those who keep odd hours, and he eats from the smoked smorgasbord without restraint. A thought occurs to him as he consumes the charcuterie. Where does it all come from? In the wild, the order of the ecosystem is well established. Every creature is intimately familiar with its food, from the top to the bottom of the web of life. Among humans, too, there is an orderliness to these things. Whether on rural or industrial farms, any animal meant to be eaten must be able to eat in turn. His current environs, cursed as they are, seem to laugh in the face of that natural order. Nobody works, yet everyone eats. There is nothing the old wolf can offer to earn his keep, because nobody needs to earn anything, and so he faces few options beyond throwing himself upon their mercy or else continuing to live as a lonely scavenger in their midst. The wolf opts to spend the night seeking answers and wanders into the trackless desert in search of something that might affirm his expectations. Any familiar sign of life will do, even the shyest herb or blade of grass upon which a cow might graze. I got news for you, buddy. He walks the hotel's perimeter, hoping to use the cliff's elevation to get a better view of his surroundings. He sees the parking lot and the road, and then a sudden gust of wind splashes color into the sterile void. Flowers sway in the breeze, bathing the wolf in a fragrance so gentle as to be almost insubstantial. Bunches of pure white blooms, six-petaled, beckon him with their languid wave. From the drooping bush and haggard tree beyond, strong herbal odors waft towards him, somewhere between oregano and eucalyptus from one, with the addition of pine and mint from the other. Two figures stand in the garden's center. A man with one hand outstretched, and a faithful watchdog at his side. Each is so lifelike that he dares not intrude further upon their sanctuary. The peace they exude, he knows, cannot be taken for granted. Nonetheless, the wolf is relieved enough to find a place where normal plants can grow. Whether or not they are out of season is beyond his ability to reckon. Hey, do you notice that he's got a dog with him? Such is the garden's tranquility that he cannot help but sink to the ground and start to doze off beneath the statue's watchful eyes, hoping their eternal companionship will prove an example to the men in the shelter behind them when it comes time for him to reveal himself. You could be our next little Cerberus! The wolf wakens before dawn, just as the evening stars have begun to fade. However more hospitable the hotel might be than the wasteland outside, the desert shows a friendlier face at night than any he has seen within its walls. Here, beneath the dancing asphodel, he can scarcely imagine the burning hellscape it becomes during the heat of the day. The morning air is cool, and though the stars are unfamiliar, their presence makes for a breathtaking vista. Perhaps here he can allow himself to imagine a kinder world than the one to which he has become accustomed. I hope so. I want a pet. He makes his way back inside while weighing his options. It would be safer to return to his previous hiding spot and continue his observations unnoticed. But on the other hand, or analogous limb, as the case may be, it would be doubtless more valuable to find another vantage point from which he may watch events unfold. The shady space beneath the stairs has served him well, but he has learned about as much as he can with hearing alone. He knows when people are most active and how best to flee if the situation shifts, not that it would be hard to lose potential pursuers in an infinite maze. Could he live out in the desert alone, should it come to that? Could he find an exit back into the tundra? He's sure to be discovered given time, whether as a result of his own carelessness, or some unknown property of the hotel's architecture being used against him. For that matter, the longer he lingers without revealing himself, the likelier that someone will take issue with his presence. Food going missing is a dead giveaway, even if he covers his tracks in all other respects. Given all possible outcomes, he would rather meet this land's denizens on his own terms, and should the consequences prove disastrous, better to rip the bandage off rather than allow fear to fester. That, of course, raises the question. What context would give him the best chance to prove he means no harm? Robbed of his nose, his tracking skills have been rather diminished by several orders of magnitude. His chance of singling out an individual, or even a small group of would-be wildlife ambassadors, is slim to none. Regardless, he must find someone willing to take him in. He has only just wedged himself beneath a staircase when he picks up a distant tremor. Though he struggles to hear it, he can feel the reverberations through the stone. Someone is approaching. By his guess, it has the weight of an adult man, though he never imagined a man so adept at moving with near feline grace. Oh, is it gonna be Luke? As the footsteps pass over him, he catches a slight breeze, proof that the individual is deceptively broad of frame for someone so apt at sneaking. Yeah, it's Luke. Got them cat paws, you know? The smell, too, seems to be at odds with his other senses. There is a scent of the outdoors, a rugged odor of sweat and sun, powerful enough to be almost acrid to the wolf's sensitive snout. Though it is surely animal in origin, his ears cannot be fooled. It walks upright like a man, whatever it really is. Once it is past, the wolf wriggles from its hiding spot as discreetly as he can. The hour is not too late, and this new creature bears immediate investigation. If another beast has wandered into the hotel, there may yet be hope for him. He catches sight of the hybrid shortly after and stops short, trying to puzzle out its origin. A bull and a human may be an odd pair of progenitors, but it makes a degree of sense that the bovine biped he saw would be the offspring of such a couple. An eagle and a cougar, however, are incompatible in ways which go far beyond mere disregard for social mores. It must have been a truly unfortunate accident of nature that this catbird came to be at all, but it nonetheless looks to be thriving. Who better to befriend than an assured outcast? And the wolfie tries to make friends with Luke. It navigates the metal forest without breaking stride, and the wolf watches intently from behind the rocky plateau which separates the two of them as the creature begins working its magic. While much of his view of the white obelisk through which it rummages is hidden behind the catbird's wings, he recognizes the contents of its claws as food the moment it turns around. Whatever this white cuboid is, the hybrid has a command of its physiology that cannot be overlooked. It does not stir at the creature's touch, only letting out the same low hum he heard on his first foray into the kitchen as the catbird plunders it of meat and eggs in abundance. Tittering birdsong fills the air, as does the scent of sustenance. The creature has begun vocalizing, humming softly to itself as its food cooks. Glad as the wolf was to find any repast here in days prior, a hot meal is a prospect that excites his instincts. The closest he can naturally come to warm food in the wild is a fresh kill, and his mind cannot help but make the association. Every drop of fat that becomes airborne settles right in the wolf's olfactory bulb, triggering a rush of dopamine. His mouth is full of drool in mere moments, and his tail bursts into an ecstatic wag. Whatever his initial misgivings about this thing or its species, anyone who appreciates meat to such a degree is a worthy friend indeed. Fun fact, wolves can't actually bark. They can only, make growling, rumbling, howling sounds. They don't have, the physiology for barking. It's exclusively a dog thing. Before his stomach can overtake him completely, the wolf barks to attract the hybrid's attention. Upon noticing him, the corners of its beak seem to curve upward into a smile.
Well, hey there! You're a big fella now, ain't you? Who's your good boy? Who is?
The wolf's fur bristles as the creature draws closer, but he roots himself to the spot for fear of another social setback costing him his chance. The catbird grabs a piece of half-cooked bacon in one claw and squats, letting the wolf sniff it and approach it in his own time.
Easy there, boy. I ain't gonna hurt you. Old Luke knows what you're after. Ain't met a dog yet that didn't love bacon.
Like any animal presented with such an enticing treat, the wolf can hardly believe his good fortune. He waits for the inevitable catch, anticipating any sudden movement, such as the hybrid's hand shooting forward to take him unawares, much like the bullman before him. Just like any other stray, he is slow to trust. However, life tends to happen while we make other plans. The wolf's prospective weeks of carefully testing boundaries evaporate with a single act of goodwill. In the time it takes the wolf to consider whether or not he should take the bacon, Luke has set it down and backed away a few steps. The wolf steps forward and snatches up the offering, smacking his chops in satisfaction as he bites into his savory snack. After he swallowed it, he licks the space of floor where it landed until he is sure that he has gotten every last bit of nutritious, toothsome grease. Then the wolf pads gingerly towards the still squatting catbird to offer his gratitude, such as it is. In a flash, his tongue darts out to bathe his benefactor's fingers in drool, and his nose nuzzles Luke's palm in kind. He is careful to resist the urge to nip at the scaly flesh of the eagle's talons, no matter how tasty the bacon fat which coats them may be.
See, better than a poke in an eye with a sharp stick, ain't it, boy?
The creature rises to his feet, and the wolf scampers back to a safe distance, only for the siren's song of crispy, thick-cut bacon to draw him inexorably back to Luke's side. This time he eats it straight from his benefactor's hands, letting out a yip of appreciation when he's through. If there was anyone who was going to befriend a random wild wolf in the hotel, of course it's this bastard. Courage swells in the wolf's chest with each morsel of meat that lands in his stomach, though he still scampers back whenever Luke attempts to draw closer than arm's length. However willing the hybrid might be to lavish his new pet with physical affection, the gesture remains foreign to the wild animal. Wolves at play are prone to all manner of roughhousing, growling, and capering about as they please, none of which is appropriate within the cramped confines of the hotel's interior with a near total stranger. It is still too much too soon. Once it becomes clear that he will not be receiving any further treats for the moment, the wolf chooses to stand a respectful distance away while this new acquaintance finishes preparing his own food. There is no need for the lupine to remain underfoot, even as Luke whistles for his attention and beckons him towards a table. He thinks better of venturing near enough to touch. Still, the eagle's table manners arouse some manner of curiosity in his animal companion. Despite the fact that his beak is better suited for tearing meat into bite-sized chunks, Luke couldn't care less, swallowing sausage links whole and shoveling mountains of hash browns, bacon, and eggs into his mouth with abandon. The hybrid takes no time at all to finish eating, after which he continues to make the occasional diplomatic overture towards his new friend. The wolf listens, in a manner, turning his head towards Luke when he's called, but recognizing nothing beyond the fact that he's being talked to. He only responds when he hears footsteps approaching, turning towards the lounge's entrance and barking thrice at the arrival of a group of strange lizards, each about the size of a child 3 or 4 years old. Reptiles seldom smell of anything. It is more difficult for scents to cling to scales than to seep into a mammal's fur, for instance. However, the wolf catches a faint musty odor, like a rock upon which moss has just begun to grow, or a room that hasn't been dusted in some time.
What is it, boy? Someone fall down a well?
By the time Luke has risen to his feet, the strangers have scurried away. The wolf resists the urge to chase them down, though he could drive them back towards the lounge to see what the catbird can make of them with little effort. In allowing them to escape, and thus alert more people to his presence, the wolf has chosen to make his stand. The wait, though brief, is agonizing, especially when he hears them return, accompanied by a familiar set of hoofbeats. A short while later, the bullman makes his entrance, only to stiffen up at the sight of the wolf, much to the consternation of the 3 lizards cowering behind his enormous frame. Their eyes meet, but neither moves or makes a sound until Luke's blithe spirit breaks through the awkwardness. Both turn towards him in equal confusion, although the wolf at least has the excuse of inability to comprehend human language.
Hey, Angus! Perfect timing! I found this stray dog. Looks like he just wandered in, no collar or tag or nothing. You figure I could get you to whip up a leash or something for him?
Luke, that I know not how best to say this, but that is not a dog. It is a wolf. A wild animal does not have need for a collar.
Nonsense! He might be playing hard to get right now, but he was taking treats right out of my hand earlier. Give him a little time to warm up to you, and I guarantee he's friendly.
As much as I'd like to believe that, I would rather not take the chance. You have seen the monsters that lurk beyond the hotel's walls. The animals of the desert, even the plants, if given the opportunity, they will do harm to all who come near them, especially me.
I ain't arguing with that, but has one of them ever waited this long to attack once someone got close enough?
No, I suppose not, but...
Besides, the hotel's magic is supposed to keep them away, ain't it? They ain't never come close to entering, much less beg for food, have they?
In that case, he could be like the foreman. Argus has seldom hunted me directly, but he is as much a monster of the labyrinth as any other, although more wily than most of his brethren.
Oh, please! Anyone could tell he don't belong out in the desert. His fur's too thick. Poor thing overheat faster than a griddle in summer. And ain't it the hotel's mission to give a home to those who need it, brother? I say a stray like him qualifies.
It is, but think of the other guests for a moment. Even if he is not a monster, per se, that does not mean he is not a danger. There is no guarantee that he will not frighten or even harm one of the other guests. It's not like we can have him sign the check-in forms. The kobolds tell me that he barked at them, and when I first saw him, he jumped up to bite me on the mouth. What if he bites someone else?
You sure he wasn't just trying to lick your face or something? If he's really a wolf, and about as wild and dangerous as you say, how'd you get away? No offense, but you're too big a softy to fight off a real predator, I reckon.
I thought he was trying to hurt me, so I punched him.
And it shows. Poor guy's just about as scared of you as you are of him. You know what? Give me a minute. I think I got an idea to smooth things over between the two of you.
I forget how hard it is to do Luke's voice, but I am committed to that. With their feathered friends withdraw, the tense atmosphere reasserts itself in seconds, the ruffled ruminant's eyes filled with inquisitorial suspicion, doubtlessly born of countless of years of ill fortune. He sees the old wolf for what he is, rather than what he could be, a predator rather than a friend. The wolf cannot return the upright undulate's suspicion on equal grounds, but the fact remains that he came to harm at the other's hand unprovoked. This is what he has come to expect of the bullman, whatever the catbird's affectionate affiliation with it. He tries his best to look non-threatening while he waits.
Come on, here!
The craven cowman winces as Luke forces a strip of uncooked bacon into his hand. Puzzlement appears on his face, only to be immediately supplanted by disbelief, and then acceptance. Both of them, there is no quicker way to verify the truth of the catbird's story than to put it to the test, even if it means that the bull must endure a moment's risk.
You expect me to feed him?
If he bites anyone, I'll take him out of the hotel myself. I'm sure I can find some nice place somewhere to turn him loose.
The bovine biped shoos the little lizards away from his legs and sinks into a squat, holding the piece of pork as far from his body as possible. Fearful, he starts to turn his head from the wolf's direction as though expecting to lose his fingers. Meanwhile, the kobolds continue to cower beneath his step-wide back. The wolf pads forward, no more eager to get within reach than his assailant is, but snatches the piece of bacon without delay. As he did before, he licks the residual grease from his new companion's fingers before snuffling peaceably at the flesh of his palm. The bullman's gaze returns to this wayward soul, and he lets out a deep exhale as he pulls his arm back towards his chest. The wolf sits still, a small victory in itself. He will tolerate this creature's presence so long as there are no further incidents.
See what I tell you, no harm, no foul.
You're the foul.
All right, I suppose he can stay once I've talked this over with Master Rukari.
You ain't gonna regret it, I promise. Dogs are smart, you know, so long as we keep feeding them, I'm willing to bet we could train him to work for us. Might not be much use down in the old nerd basement, but he's probably got a good nose for danger. He'll be our canary in the coal mine if you send him out to the valley with a team.
Content that their protector has been left unharmed, the kobolds peek out from behind the bull's bulk, while he and Luke begin working out the logistics of caring for a wolf. Before either can speak a word of warning, they begin their advance, scrambling over one another for the chance to interact with the hotel's new pet dog.
Puppy! Me first, I want to pet him! No, me!
Thankfully, before the rambunctious little reptiles can get too far ahead of themselves, the catbird intercedes as the wolf backs off. Luke catches one kobold by the collar and clotheslines the others to his chest with his free arm.
Oh, no you don't. You're all gonna scare him off if you rush him like that. You gotta let him come to you. Here, let me get another piece of bacon. Y'all can feed him a little chunk and see where it leads.
Luke goes to get another piece of meat for the kobolds to feed their new pet, while the cow begins murmuring to himself, lost in thought. As the wolf accepts each bite of food and licks the giggling lizards clean in turn, his eyes watch his prey turn packmate, appraising every move as the bullman paces back and forth.
I will have to put up signs to ensure no one takes issue with him being here. On second thought, it might be better to mention him directly to the guests.
There is a practiced ease in its hoofbeats with a return to routine, as though his heartbeat were playing out in every step. Then at last he looks to the wolf, and though his eyes still carry a tinge of suspicion, his trial with this newest arrival is over. His face is softened from the paralytic terror with which he once regarded the animal, leaving only the mien of a seasoned host. There is no experience upon which the wolf may lean to help him navigate through what remains of the morning, but even so, he meets the undulate's gaze without judgment. The catbird's generosity revealed that he accepts both parties as members of his pack, and the wolf in turn vows to hold on to that same spirit.
I know you cannot understand me, but this place is a home for the lost. And if you are one among that number, then, well, welcome to our establishment, Wolf.
Yay!
A home really is all that you were after, wasn't it?
Wolf lets out a contented yawn and then a single quiet bark. Wolf has joined your staff. Awesome! This is a very long episode, so we're gonna pause it here as we enter into what I'm assuming is going to be a new chapter or day or something or other. Somewhere as my phone rings. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you're enjoying this series. If you like it, that's great. We'll keep on trucking until we get somewhere to an ending, okay? Okay. Goodbye!